The housing prices in Arizona have skyrocketed, but is there relief ahead for those looking to buy a house in Arizona? And if so, how long will the lower prices last? Plus, the plan for the 2026 midterm election is already taking shape. Find out what the top issues are shaping the campaigns. And the Phoenix Suns have introduced our new head coach. Find out about his plans for the team. It's all that and more this evening on Broomhead. Welcome, I'm Mike Broomhead. Before we jump into today's interviews, let's take a look at some of the top stories.
Yeah, I'm not into proving people right, changing the doubter's mind. I just don't think like that, to be honest with you. It's what I do on a day-to-day basis, who I want to help. That's important to me.
Going to be an interesting time and see what this coach is able to accomplish. It's his first NBA coaching job. He was an assistant with the Cleveland Cavaliers. He'll be the fourth head coach for the Suns in 4 seasons. They finished last season with a 36-46 record. But I think this is going to be more about player development than it is about their record. They're in a very tough spot with player contracts, but Devin Booker is one of the best players in the league by anybody's estimation, but he has kind of underperformed along with Kevin Durant. If Kevin Durant is gone, do we see the next step forward for Booker? That's one of the things. Bradley Beal and the players they have. They are going to be a performance team, maybe a playoff team if they're lucky in the minds of most. I'm not an expert on basketball, but I think this coach should be judged more on player development than on their record, because he is going to be doing this with one hand tied behind his back because they can't make the moves necessary to move into that upper echelon like we've seen other Western Conference teams do. So this is an awkward time for the Phoenix Suns. It is a transitional time, and I hope this young head coach gets a chance to show what he can do. Another big story is Axon. Axon and Scottsdale have broken off their negotiations. I talked with the president of Axon this week, and he said they did their best, and he said he had a great rapport with the mayor of Scottsdale, but there are some council members that just won't budge. They were offering to reduce the number of apartments at their complex down to about 850. That's about 1,000 less than they were proposing in the first place. So now they're saying we're going back to our original plan. We have got the state law behind us, and we're going to go to work. The mayor of Scottsdale said she hopes there's still room for a negotiation and possibly some concessions by Axon. And Axon said to me, we want to be good neighbors in Scottsdale. We love Scottsdale. We want to stay here, but they've got to get moving on their project. And the concerns are that the city of Scottsdale is never going to allow anything to happen, that they're just going to have to move forward. I'm anxious to see how this plays out. It's a lot of jobs. The other big story are the protests across the country, especially in Southern California. Many of them have turned violent. Some of them have turned into riots. So I want to acknowledge that they are mostly peaceful in this sense. The majority of people are protesting peacefully. But if you go to a basketball game with the Suns, and after the game on the way out, a brawl breaks out in the hallway and 14 people are fist fighting, you're not going to see a headline that says a mostly peaceful basketball game. You're going to hear about the brawl in the hallway. These violent people have to be stopped, and at some point, maybe these protesters or the organizers of these protests are going to have to start pointing out the violent people. Because if you do that, if police can step in and arrest, and you're part of the solution, you're not going to be connected to the problem. I may not agree with why they're protesting, but I stand behind their right to protest. They should be allowed to protest peacefully. But the police have to stop the looting, the burning of property, the destruction of property, and the violence. They have got to stop all of that from happening. That's just common sense. Coming up, word around the neighborhood is that the housing market is shifting from a seller's market to a buyer's market. Is that true? And what do either of them mean? Find out when Broomhead returns. It's important to recognize and thank the fine Arizona men and women who are serving in our country's military. One of the ways we like to do that is through a segment called From Arizona for America, brought to you by my good friends at Sanderson Ford. So join me in honoring Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Sierra Koch, a native of Apache Junction, Arizona. She's serving aboard the U.S. Navy Medicine Readiness and Training Command, Guantanamo Bay, at U.S. Naval Hospital, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. For a list of more of our friends and neighbors that are from Arizona for America, go to the Broomhead tab at cw7az.com. Talking talking about the real estate market here in the Valley. Everybody's concerned about buyer's market, seller's market. Joining us, Trevor Halpern from Halpern Residential. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's talk about this. Is it a buyer's market, and what exactly does that mean if it is?
Yeah, statistically, it's a buyer's market. So when we look, I gauge it by what's called the Cromford Market Index. 100 is balanced. Anything below that is a buyer's market. Anything above that is a seller's market. We're at a 79.
Okay.
So we are solidly, when you look at the Valley as a whole, we're solidly in buyer's market territory. What that means is negotiation power for buyers and a little bit of give on the seller side.
Is there a concern that we're going to see the bubble burst like we saw 2009, 2010? Is that a danger in Arizona? Or are we in a place where our housing market's pretty solid?
Overall, we're in a place where the housing market is very solid. You know, the analysts that I pay attention to in my own examination over 14 years in this marketplace, the fundamentals are very different than 2008. There's nothing similar. So, you know, people around the water cooler may go, oh, I'm feeling something. It feels like 2008, but the fundamentals are just not the same at all. So as far as a bubble burst in the same manner as 2008, we're not foreseeing that.
People are looking at interest rates. They've got interest rates that they renegotiated or they refinanced down to the 3% range. And they're saying, why would I jump in at 6 or 7%? But in a buyer's market, you have a roof that has to be replaced. This happened to me. Mm-hmm. I went to them and said, I want real money so I can replace this roof. And because I was able to negotiate, it was that buyer's market. They said yes. Where in other times they won't. Is that a consideration for people that are buying?
100%. I mean, a buyer's market gives you leverage. Now, a buyer's market comes with pluses and minuses. A buyer's market means maybe we are in a descending price continuum. Maybe we're seeing prices soften. Maybe we're seeing prices go down a little bit. But when you buy a home specifically to live in it, the idea is that time cures all. When we look at the real estate market over time, we see the graph go up. Yeah, there are fluctuations, but if you're going to hold a house for 10 years, the likelihood is any sort of temporary price drop, you're going to recoup on the back end. Now, the leverage up front is in a buyer's market, you can get a roof. You know, I've got a buyer under contract right now. We're asking for roof. We're going to ask for sewer line repairs. And we're going to ask for mold remediation. It's a $900,000 purchase. We're probably going to ask for $50,000 or $60,000 worth of repairs. And we're likely going to get it because we have that leverage as buyers right now because there aren't 6 or 7 people knocking down the door of that seller.
And when that happens, you better buy now. And there are people that were bidding over asking price to get houses as the market was before.
Yeah.
So let's talk interest rates for a minute because people have a big concern about interest rates. They're around 7 right now. Where is that sweet spot going to be for interest rates where people are comfortable buying and selling again? What is going to ease people's minds?
Yeah, you know, typically what we've experienced, and we saw this little dip probably 12 to 18 months ago, we saw things dip into the 5s, the high 5s. My phone started blowing up. The lenders that I work with, their phones started blowing up. So lenders like to call each of these big numbers a handle, 5 handle. We're solidly in the 5s. When we start dipping into the low 6s and the high 5s, we can expect the marketplace to activate. Buyers don't go away. They just sit on the sidelines. So you can expect as a buyer, if interest rates come down and you activate, well, you and a dozen other people looking at the same home are likely to activate. So that's going to put upward pressure on pricing, and it's going to put downward pressure on a buyer's ability to actually get those types of concessions that we just talked about.
Best part of the Valley that's still the hottest. Where is it?
You know, the central parts of town tend to maintain a lot of their viability and activity. I will say too, like you've got some in the Southeast Valley and in the Southwest Valley that are active. Avondale's on the seller side of the market right now. Chandler's on the seller side of the market right now. Three of our cities are considered sellers markets. 7 are balanced and 7 are in buyer market territory right now. So those 3, and it's interesting that they are spread on the periphery, but they all have their various reasons for being active and pushing up on a pricing continuum.
Biggest purchase people make is their home. I love the information because it's going to help a lot of people. So thanks for doing this.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, we'll be back in just a moment. Coming up, even with over a year to go before the 2026 midterm election, the election landscape is already taking shape. Find out what's ahead for Arizona voters next. Polling, what is the climate? How are people feeling about the important issues? Every time we have that discussion, it's always Mike Noble, Noble Predictive Insights. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
Let's talk about this poll you put out, crime costs and confidence. What is this telling us about these issues?
Well, it's pretty interesting with our recent quarterly pulse of 1,000 registered voters in Arizona. Seeing to see what they think of the sentiment, what are their perceptions, and currently, when it comes to the economics, especially the tariffs, Mexico is the biggest trading partner for Arizona, but also Trump has rolled out about 25% tariff on about half of the goods out of there, so it's a pretty big impact. But right now, a majority of Arizonans have think it's hurting the Arizona economy, where only 1/3 of Arizonans think it's helping the Arizona economy.
And I don't know if is this an emotional thing. What I mean by that is when the numbers come out on inflation and they're not really as bad as they were expected, will that change people's mind the next time you do it? Is it an emotional thing or is it a fact-driven thing?
Oh, no. It's definitely an emotion or vibes-driven thing.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. Because let's be honest, the majority of the electorate are not economists, right? They're living day-to-day lives, doing day-to-day things. And so what I expect is that as we have the pulse on it, that could go up or down. So depending how the tariffs and trades pan out, I could see it possibly moving upwards, again, depending as right now what's driving it is really just a lot of this uncertainty and a lot of change. And so as more of these things come down, that should equal out. But right now it's a great wedge issue for Democrats.
What about the crime piece of this?
Oh, well, it's interesting. The crime piece, that's where Trump's doing really, really well. So we took at it from an interesting angle. And it was more segmenting like, hey, based on the deporting, like what is the type of crimes essentially that they're committing? So is it like a major crime like murder, things like that, compared to like a white collar crime, like money laundering, et cetera, and then like a traffic stop, a minor crime. And it was interesting is that the Republicans are in a fantastic position when it comes to major and white collar crimes. There's actually not much of a big difference between, I don't know, murder and money laundering. But when it comes to a minor crime, it was actually more 50-50. But either way, the GOP is really winning on this issue. And that's why like the ICE raids and things like that, they're really leaning into that because they're doing very well with the electorate when it comes to that issue.
I saw a national poll that said nationally that Trump has gained 40 points on the immigration issue, where he was underwater in 2020, and now he's actually a couple of points ahead on the immigration issue.
It's hands down his best issue. He's doing fantastic. He's getting great marks. Not only he's peeling off some Democrats, but doing great with independents and with Republicans. So it's hands down his best issue. Where what's different from his last term is that when COVID hit and the economy tanked, voters didn't give him a negative, didn't attach him to that. Now his numbers are very close with the economy right now. So really the pressure's on for him to, this reshuffling that he's doing for that to pay off by the midterms, I'd say.
I don't know if you're ever surprised by your own results, because I know, because your thumb's not on the scale. The data is what the data is. I was surprised by one of the issues about the direction of the country. Are we on the right track or are we on the wrong track? 52% of Republicans, 51% of Democrats in your poll believed we're on the right track. Where they're underwater, independent voters are saying, no, we're not.
Yeah, no, that was shocking, to be honest.
Okay, good.
Well, we pull not only Arizona, Nevada, Utah. We also have a national tracker. And so we see this all the time. And always typically the party in power is the one ahead. And it was probably one of the first times to see both parties agreeing the right direction. But also I think it goes to show that this is why Arizona is like one of the premier battleground states. I mean, Democrats have some of the federal offices, like the U.S. Senate seat. They have the governorship. Republicans have the legislature and others. It just shows how incredibly competitive our state is, but also that we're a battleground. But it's funny to see both the parties are happy with it, but those folks kind of party-less or a little less enthused.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see the direction of this. I hope you'll do this with us once a quarter as these numbers come out, because I'm fascinated to see what the trends are and what the people are saying.
Hey, anything for you, Mike.
I appreciate the time. What is, very quick, at 30 seconds, what's another poll you're working on we should be watching for?
Oh, another one. I guess I'll announce it here. We haven't announced it yet, but we will be actually expanding to our fourth state, a tracker, to our CUPOP, or California Public Opinion Pulse, with an emphasis on Southern California, which I think has a lot of synergy with the Southwest and Arizona at large. So I'm really, really excited about that, pushing into that market, and we'll be actively tracking that state besides Arizona, Nevada, and Utah in our national tracker.
Fingers on the pulse of what's happening in polls across the southwestern United States. Always check out Noble Predictive Insights. We'll be back. Coming up, from a remittance tax to immigration protests across the country, we're taking a look at the latest issues between the U.S. and Mexico with the Consulate General of Mexico next. Here's a look at some upcoming events that should be on your radar. First up, the 44th Annual Prescott Bluegrass Festival, happening June 21st and 22nd on Goodwin Street in downtown Prescott. Admission is free both days. Then, the CD7 special primary election happening July 15th. If you live in the Tucson area, make sure you're registered to vote by June 16th. Early voting begins on June 18th. The relationship between the United States and Mexico, it is an economic relationship and many others as well. To talk about that, the Consul General Jorge Illescas from Mexico. Thank you for being here again.
Thank you for the space, Mike.
I want to talk about the remittance tax that's being proposed. I don't think a lot of Americans understand what that is. Can you explain what it is and what you believe the implications would be?
Yes, well, this is a proposal in the current budget bill that is being discussed in the U.S. Congress. One of the pieces of this potential legislation is a tax of 3.5% on any remittances going overseas. We think in the case of Mexico that if approved, this specific disposition would affect both economies, local consumption especially, since the migrants spend more than 80% of their income here in the U.S. and they send 20%. And for those economies are very important. All these resources.
And 3.5% doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if you think about, I guess the closest thing for us to think about is an ATM fee. You know, there's a fee to take money out of an ATM machine, so that any time a Mexican national sends money home, this would be a 3.5% fee on that money, correct?
Yes, plus what they have to pay to the sender agency.
Right. So if it's Western Union or whatever it is. So this would be damaging, especially when many of the people that are here working are considered working class or low income workers.
Yes, especially here in Arizona, being so close to the border. Let's say if one migrant sends $1,000 per month to Mexico, it will be deduced like $35.
So $35.
So that means that he may not spend those $35 on the local economy, the local businesses. He may miss going to the movie theater. He may miss to pay or donating to the church or anything. You know?
Have you had discussions with the congressional delegation in Arizona, and how have they received your message on this?
Yes, well, we have discussed this with political and economic and actually religious stakeholders, and we are in trying to reach as soon as possible to the Congress delegation of Arizona in order to explain our concern in a very respectful way, of course.
So I want to shift for just a moment about what's happening in Southern California. We've seen some violence happening with the protests there. The concern is those protests could become violent here in Arizona. What do you say to the people that are protesting? They obviously have a right to protest in America, but what do you say about some of the conduct when it gets violent?
Well, I will be very quick and very straightforward. I don't recommend that any person who's not a U.S. citizen be part of the protest. First of all, if they are permanent resident or lawful residents, just remain. They don't have to. I don't think it's not necessary that they protest. Also, to the Mexican-American community who may be protesting, they need to do in the peaceful way. And I suggest this very respectful. If they're using any flag, they use the American one. That's it.
Isn't it interesting that the message gets lost? Because as soon as violence occurs, we focus on the violence and not the discussion of why you're out there protesting.
Right. Yes, because in this chaos that is provoked for many factors, you are not able to identify where's the origin of the problem. Perhaps we have activism or protesters who are doing in the right way the protest, but it's confusing in some point.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I appreciate the time and the expertise on this, and you're always welcome back on the show. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, sir. We'll be back. Thank you to all of the guests who joined us on today's show. If you missed any of these interviews or want to rewatch any of them, head over to cw7az.com/Broomhead. Every Sunday here on Broomhead, we ask a new poll question we'd like you to participate in. This week, the question is, Are you excited to see how the new Suns head coach will lead the team? All you have to do is head over to cw7az.com/Broomhead to respond to the poll question. Thank you for joining us this week on Broomhead.